Welcome to the never-ending game week in the Premier League. It's match day 21 all over again, and we're back with even more picks for the same week. Extended edition. Gareth Wheeler, Jake Osgathorpe with you as we delve into the 5 games this weekend. Of course, it's a little bit different in the Premier League this time around, and this year with a little bit of a winter break for all teams involved in the FA Cup and Cup competitions being played. That game week 21 has been extended and basically separated into 2 halves. So we're in the second 45 minutes of our picks here. Jake, do you feel like you can go the distance and go the full 90 here?
I hope so, but after last week's showing, I might have got subbed off.
Chin up, because head-to-head, Jake Osgathorpe has simply dominated yours truly over the course of the season. We had 2 head-to-heads last week, 1 push in the United Spurs game. We'll get to that in a moment. But Gareth Wheeler actually came out on top in a Gareth v. Jake head-to-head. Tell me that I'm living in the real world here, or perhaps that just means better omens for 2024.
Could very much mean exactly that. Yeah, new year and a change of fortunes for you in the head-to-head battle. But yeah, it was looking, when United 2-1 up, I thought I'd given 2 back within 1 game week. So thankfully Tottenham were the better team on the day, and they did ultimately get a deserved point. But just in general, I had a bad week. There was a couple of things that went against me, as is always the case when it comes to betting. But yeah, we move on. And the Everton Villa game was probably one of the better games I've seen that's been 0-0 in a long while.
Yeah, it was crazy. I can't believe it stayed 0-0. To be honest, the one game, and I think it's relevant to touch on out of the gate before we get into our 5 picks and predictions for this upcoming match week. It was a Manchester City Newcastle. I basically had the over 3 in that game. You had under 3. You thought it'd be tight and cagey. Kevin De Bruyne right back into the team. What a player. What a performance in Oscar Bob, the late winner, which helped me cash, I believe it was plus 307, City to win, plus over 2.5. You thought it was going to be a tight and cagey game. I just wonder, on both sides of the coin here, Jake, with De Bruyne back in the City side, I know Erling Haaland not playing yet. They're hoping he will play come the end of the month. What this may mean for them. And on the opposite side of the coin, this is like back-to-back games where Newcastle just not only conceding goals, but conceding chances as well. Let's start off with the City side of the equation, and it'll let you work to what we've learned over the past month or so about Newcastle as well.
Yeah, it's for the City one. It's just we said it a few podcasts ago when they were touching around even money to win the title, that was the time to get on board. And that ship sailed, unfortunately. Now it's minus 175, and I think they're only going to get shorter. You look at Liverpool; they're second at plus 250. They've got a tough game this weekend away at Bournemouth, and if they fail to win that, then City are just going to get even shorter without even playing. But yeah, we kind of touched on it for a long period of time that City was still within touching distance at the top without their 2 best players for a long stretch. Obviously, De Bruyne for most of the season. Haaland's been missing for 5-6 games now. Stones has been in and out as well. So effectively, 3 of the best players from last season have featured very sparingly. De Bruyne, he just showed his class. He is probably the best player in the Premier League. Haaland scores all the goals, but I think De Bruyne has the biggest effect on any football team in the Premier League. I think during that game against Newcastle, City had created 1.5 expected goals in the 70 minutes before De Bruyne came on, and 1.7 in the 20 after he came on, which kind of, obviously you can't pin that just on him, but it shows you the effect and the impact he has. And I mean, the cross for the Oscar Bob goal, it wasn't even a cross, was it? It was a pass. He picked him out of the back post.
Brilliant.
It was sensational, and the finish was class as well. So yeah, it looks ominous for everyone else involved. I think that City, they usually second half of the season, they usually just absolutely fly anyway. But yeah, they haven't. I guess compared to last year, they had at least 9 points on Arsenal. They had to kind of rail in. This year, it's only a couple, so they could really run away with it by April, and then really focus on doing potentially another treble back to back, which would be obscene.
It's wild because they're not even top of the table right now, and still minus 175. Also, so that's for your futures plays on Pinnacle. Also, the Golden Boot race. It's become a little bit interesting that Erling Haaland's absence hasn't been punished that much. He's joint best with Mo Salah, but Salah's off at AFCON. Right behind them is Son, and he's off at Asian Cup. And then you have De Bruyne coming back in the team, and hopefully a healthy Haaland. All directions point to Haaland, City, this juggernaut to continue to roll. What about the other side of the coin? Newcastle. They're playing against good teams, Liverpool, City, but even before that, giving up a lot of goals and a lot of chances. Now Joe Linton is gone long term, maybe even for the season. It's like the wheels have completely fallen off, and there's no signs whatsoever that they're going to go out and address any kind of need in the January transfer window either.
Yeah, I think we're going to touch on it, but they look quite constricted in terms of the financial fair play stuff from a bringing players in perspective. But yeah, just on the whole, they've I think the mixture of injuries and a increased schedule has really found them out. They had a fully decent starting 11, pretty much near full strength starting 11 last week, but they all looked leggy, they all looked tired. They started fairly well, got in front, and then it was just reminiscent of the PSG game where it was just, can we hang on for dear life to get something? And it was just a barrage of City attacks. And whenever you do that, you're just ultimately making yourself more tired because you're having to run sideways and do a bit more pressing as opposed to controlling the football and tiring the other players out. They, fortunately for them, I guess, they've got a nice break now until the next game. So last week, they played on, it was the 13th of Jan. They don't play again until the 30th. So they've got over 2 weeks, basically, to try and rest, recover, and go again. And yeah, they're 10th in the league, which is, no one expected them to be that low. I think, even yourself, who didn't have them in the top four, probably expected them to be 6th or 7th, something like that. And they could still get that. The points gap to Man United in 7th is only 3, and to West Ham, you're only looking at 5. So it's still within touching distance that they finish in the top 6. But something's got to change, especially defensively, which you touched upon. There are too many poor defensive performances.
Injuries have decimated this side. The suspension to Tonali, it's just too many games. That's why I just thought they'd finish out of the top 4 heading into the season. Just the increase of games, different responsibilities, different context. We'll see what that means for the week-to-week potential value in their play. I still think they're a decent enough side that maybe they get a little bit of juice back. I think they've been overvalued over the last little bit. So we'll see what that means. You certainly need to get some players back into that team. Just a couple other notables from earlier in this game week. Do you feel for Burnley a little bit? Like, you backed them to win. I just wouldn't touch it based upon their home precedent. But were they, in your opinion, hard done by the late equalizer by Luton Town, where Trafford, the goalkeeper, looked to be interfered with? I think he mistimed his jump, in fairness, and perhaps that's why the VAR allowed the goal to stand. It looks like he came way too close and kind of threw himself at it rather than making a legitimate play for the ball. I was kind of okay with it. I was on both teams to score, so I was happy to get that little bit of luck. But that's something that could be decisive at the bottom of the table, not only for Burnley and staring down the barrel of relegation, but potentially Luton Town just chipping away, doing enough to stay in the mix to survive.
Yeah, it was a big goal. It really was. It meant that at the time they went level on points with Everton. And Burnley, obviously, a win would have made all the difference to them in terms of getting a lot closer. I thought it was a foul. I think 99% of the time that's blown as a foul. We know nowadays you can't touch the goalkeeper.
Right.
Yeah. So it was a huge surprise to see that kind of... it wasn't like it was a light touch. There was a decent amount of contact there to the point that it stopped him from making the kind of content he wanted with the ball. So, yeah, I was very surprised to see that stand, especially, obviously, you take every incident in isolation, but especially being a Burnley game at Turf Moor, that was a brave call. And yeah, I know there's been mixed bag of opinions around the goal, whether it should have stood. There has been over here. A lot of the older players are more, that we used to play 10, 15 years ago were like, oh yeah, that definitely should have stand. But we've seen so many similar that's just been immediately blown for a foul. Even less contact actually has been blown for a foul. So it's the same thing we go back to with refereeing, isn't it? Consistency. Just want consistency.
Yeah. Well, do you know who feels justified? It's Andre Onana against Wolves. We can put that in the rearview mirror from week one. I told you it wasn't a foul. So there you go. We should touch on it quickly. United played Spurs to a 2-2. Both teams missing so many players. Spurs look very good in their movement. You just wonder what they may be when they get Son back. Kulusevski didn't play. Madison back in the team. You like Bissouma, the processes. This is a team. Yeah. This is a team that can legitimate and one of the few teams that spent here in the January window. They can be a real threat for the top four. But on the same note, I don't think United were that bad. And if they get Martinez back in the team instead of Johnny Evans playing his whatever fifth, sixth consecutive game, get some Casemiro back in that team, maybe it'll provide them a little bit more balance. I think that it was a big miss, like having to play Christian Eriksen in a role where they need a destroyer. They need someone with legs that can press, that can get out there and play in that United midfield. If it's Casemiro from last season, maybe both these teams are worth keeping an eye on in the second half of the season. They might have some value to make a little bit of a push. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was very impressed with Tottenham. Obviously, I backed them to get the win. I was fairly bold in my call, but they were, for me, the best team on the pitch. And I think neither of us were expecting Romero to play, were we, at centre-half? He battled through whatever injury he got.
It's a game changer. It was a real game changer, Jake. Yeah.
And I think we, when they've got Romero and Van de Ven at centre-half, I think we see a completely different Spurs team defensively. I think they're much more... I know they conceded twice, but I think in general, they control the game a little bit more, they control the ball a little bit more, and they limit their opponents much better. So that's something to bear in mind. But it depends on how AFCON goes for me, because I know they've got, obviously, Son's away at the Asian Cup, who's a big player for them. But that midfield is just... like they had no right with Bentancur, Skip and Højbjerg to go to Man United and dominate the midfield. Like, they had no right.
But it tells you a lot about the United midfield. That's what it tells you.
It does. But that for me, that's like, if they get Bissouma and Papassar back, then they'll be a serious force down the way, because obviously we're bringing Werner in, you've got Johnson and Richarlison. Yeah, they're not the most prolific of attackers, but there's good options there, especially with Porro and Udogie causing all kinds of problems. So, I was very impressed with Spurs, and it did have me leaning towards making a pro-Spurs future, but it's just one of those, as I said, the midfield for me is just so lacking without Bissouma and Sarr. And obviously, I was expecting Lo Celso to play. He wasn't in the squad with an injury. So, yeah, what he's done, there's a lot of chat over here in England about what Postecoglou's done there in such a short space of time, putting his imprint on this team, and you've got a style of play. You know exactly what you want to do. You've seen the patterns of football, and it's still the opposite of Man United.
Yeah, I'll tell you the two stars in that team, the fullbacks, Udogie and Porro, excellent. Both players help make that team tick. We'll see. I told you about Timo Werner. Couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat, that guy. So just, I don't know if that is a proper move to take another step forward. In United, McTominay could have gone and won that game. I'm seeing some signs of life. Really miss Luke Shaw, Wan-Bissaka playing on the left. If they can get their players back, then maybe there's going to be a little bit of a push. Maybe not top five, maybe a little bit more realistic. We'll see. Which brings us to the January window. Hear that? Yeah, me neither. It is silent. It is so quiet in the transfer market right now. A lack of movement. In fact, just 10% of the money spent this January window than was at this time in 2023. Only about $34 million have been spent. $345 million were spent at this juncture last season during the transfer window. So what does it mean to you, Jake, when it comes to the markets? What does the lack of spending tell you? Does it tell you that there's much less of a threat to be relegated this campaign? So some of those teams that might tend to spend to survive, they're not willing to push it. Perhaps there's balance atop the table. Obviously, profit and sustainability has a lot to do with this. Punishments levied Everton's way again for the second time this season. Nottingham Forest has been drawn into it, and we're all waiting for the shoe to drop on 115 charges levied Manchester City's way and how that could affect things. So let's go step by step here. First, on the market and the lack of movement, do you foresee this continuing, it to be quiet? And if so, what does that mean for the markets?
Yeah, I think back to yesteryear, and you generally have 2 or 3 teams now near the foot of the table that probably go into the season, they expect not to be there. They'll have changed the manager, and that manager wants some players. Like we call it panic buying. They're just buying players to fit a short-term system and a short-term style to get you clear of safety. But as you mentioned, there's probably not as much fear around the teams that are near the foot of the table to kind of force them to part ways with money that might cost them in the long run, as we've seen with Everton and Nottingham Forest. So the last thing you want to be doing is, if you're a Brentford or a Fulham, is to be throwing cash in this season of all seasons, where it looks like it's just one spot up for a relegation, and then risking 3 years down the line getting a potential charge that could see you relegated. So I think definitely that is the case. Obviously, Everton are in a position where they can't spend any money right now. They're the team just above the drop zone. Brentford are a team that generally don't spend huge sums of money. They do things in a smart way, and they've got a 20-goal season striker coming back to them after a lengthy ban, so they're probably not desperate to go into the market. I mean, if Tony does leave, it's going to be a huge fee that they could then reinvest, and that might be their way of playing it. Forest, as you mentioned, they're another team that have been charged. And then Crystal Palace, they've got a 5-point cushion on relegation. They've got a manager who knows how to get results in general. They're another team that's been hit with injuries to key players. If they get them back fit, they'd probably fancy themselves to be comfortable. So, yeah, I think at the bottom, which is where you usually see quite a lot of money spent, I do think there's a little bit of a kind of, hold fire and save it for the summer and reassess and see what the situation is. And then at the top, Man City with all their charges, they're not going to go splashing loads of cash on players, and Arsenal potentially could do at some stage in the window. I know they potentially hit that FFP wall, might have to sell before they buy, but it's looking like that. Even Liverpool, it's taking a chance on one player to kind of push you over the line in January is a big risk, because very rarely do we see those January transfers pay off. Virgil van Dijk was one that came in January. It didn't immediately pay off, but obviously they're reaping the rewards afterwards. But in general, there's very few that are successes in January. They do come across as more panicky than anything. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see any more.
Spurs were in a good position. One purchase is center back Draguzin, and then Werner on loan. I feel like Arsenal is looking for need that number 9, but you're right. It might have to come on based upon a loan. Manchester United needs a number 9. That would have to come via a loan. You see teams like Brighton investing more future players, really part of their DNA. It's kind of like the Villas of the world. Can they push the envelope? Can some of these teams in the mix for the top 4 make smaller moves to get them across the line? But last year's insanity, driven by Chelsea and Mudryk,
basically Chelsea.
It's just not going to happen. It was Chelsea that drove the market last year, and we'll wait to see what the summer has in store and the influence of Saudi Arabia, and we might be heading into a different landscape. And this whole profit and sustainability factor. In North American sport, we're very used to salary caps. And this is just a different type of salary cap. It's not about necessarily what you're paying the players. Well, it does when it comes to losses overall, but it's all part of a puzzle. And you need to make sure that puzzle's put together. The timing of this isn't great, but you knew that this was coming for Everton and Nottingham Forest, the way that they spent in recent years, especially for 21 player purchases. Last season alone, it was just sheer insanity. And the only argument counter to punishing these teams right now in the present is the fact that we're still waiting to see what happens with Man City. I don't know how smaller clubs can feel the brunt of this when a bigger club with all kinds of power, both on and off the field, seems to be able to kick the can down the road and continues to do so. So we'll see what happens there. And maybe that's the only thing that could stop City from going on to not winning a title this season. So something to at least consider, and I'm still happy with my Liverpool overall play. So the markets, the future markets, even the week to week, not affected as much this January as it was a season ago. Ready to finish up game week 21, the final 5 games? Let's dig in.
Stuck in.
I feel like they're not as marquee as the first 5 that we had this week, but we venture
Yeah, for
forward,
sure.
and we'll start off on Saturday lunchtime. It's Arsenal taking on Crystal Palace. Arsenal, fourth place in the Premier League table, 40 points in 20 games and 5 points adrift. And it's because of the recent struggles. Knocked out of the FA Cup last time out by Liverpool. 3 losses in a row overall. 3 games without a win as well in the Premier League. Losses to Fulham and West Ham, and they also drew at Liverpool. And they played to under 2.5 in 6 of their last 7 overall. They do have the second best in expected points, according to Understat. There's certainly a need for a goal scorer, isn't there? 7th most goals scored. Good news for Arsenal this week playing at the Emirates. 22 of the 37 goals scored have been at home. However, they haven't scored in their last 2 home matches in all competitions. 7-2-1 overall at the Emirates. Second best home expected goals against at less than an expected goal per game. Tomiyasu's away at the Asian Cup. Jesus trained in Dubai. He looks good to go. Zinchenko is close to a return. Could be this weekend as well. Crystal Palace is in 14th place, 21 points, and 5 points above the relegation zone. They play Wednesday after this recording against Everton in an FA Cup replay. It was goalless in the first leg, but before that, both teams scored, played and come through in their previous 5 games, and they beat Brentford last time out in the Premier League. 3-1 was the final, snapping a streak of 8 games without a Premier League win. They lost to Chelsea 2-1 in their last away fixture, but before that, good draws away at City and West Ham. 3-3-4 away overall, 11 goals scored, 15 conceded. IU is at the AFCON. The big loss is Michael Olise. He's out with a hamstring injury again, certainly for midweek, looking like that will be the case for the weekend as well. He scored twice against Brentford and has 5 goals in his last 8 Premier League games overall. Holding, Decore, Ward, all missing out on Wednesday. Stay tuned to what their status may be for the weekend. Head-to-head, Arsenal were victorious 1-0. It was an Odegaard penalty. Tomiyasu was sent off in the 67th minute, and Arsenal held on to the whole 3 points. Arsenal have won their last 3 in a row against Crystal Palace. So no surprise here. Palace playing midweek. Arsenal, a significant favorite on Pinnacle heading into the weekend. How far are you willing to take it to back an Arsenal victory, and what else?
I can't back Arsenal at this moment in time.
Wow, you can't.
No. I've backed them quite a few times, different ways this season, and they've let me down. They've just not looked very good recently, to put it bluntly. And I'm hoping that for the neutrals' perspective, that they've come out of this little break and they find the gear, because we'd love to see a three-horse race for the title. I obviously expect them to be Crystal Palace, but I don't see any value in backing them or taking a chance on the handicap, especially against a Palace team that have caused some real problems to good teams recently, even without key players. The last 5 matches they played: Liverpool, Man City, Brighton, Chelsea, and Brentford. Obviously beat Brentford, drew at City. They beat them by 1 goal at Liverpool, beat by 1 goal at Chelsea, and drawn with Brighton. So there's some good results there against some decent teams. So yeah, I think the handicap line -1.5. I probably would want it. It's too big for me. It's too big, especially with the way in which Arsenal are attacking. As you mentioned, they're struggling to score goals. They need a number 9. They're in a bit of what we would call a finishing slump. So this season, from open play, they've scored just 21 goals in 20 matches, which is really alarming, actually, when you compare that to their fellow title contenders. Just 21 goals. And those have come from 29.6 expected goals. So, as you can tell there's almost a 9-goal underperformance, which is the reason why they are top of the table still. Because some of the actual creative performances have been good. They've just not taken the chances. For example, Liverpool, they've scored 33 open play goals, so just 12 more than Arsenal. And that's ultimately an area of massive improvement, and City at 35 open play goals. So you can see there that's a massive issue for Arsenal. Is actually, so from set pieces they've been good. Scored 8 goals from corners, 2 from free kicks. But yeah, they really need to find a way to start putting these chances away. Otherwise, they are going to be probably looking over their shoulder more than looking up. And then on the flip side, defensively, they still look a little bit uninspiring. Fulham and West Ham both managed to create plenty of chances against them. And I know Crystal Palace are missing probably the best player in Elise, and Ayew, who's a very handy player that plays out wide, draws a lot of tackles and gets them up the pitch. But I just think the price on both teams to score is just way too big. Plus 130 for a Premier League game is astoundingly big, especially given Arsenal's record at home this season, where teams like Nottingham Forest under Steve Cooper scored, Fulham scored twice, Man United have scored there, Spurs have netted twice. One of their only few clean sheets actually came against Man City, which was a non-event game, basically. Sheffield United was the other, 5-0, very straightforward. But Burnley went there and scored. Wolves went there and scored. So, Crystal Palace are more than capable, having scored in all the last 5 against that 5-match run that I mentioned, which is a tough schedule. They can at least get on the score sheet. And yeah, they might lose the game, but they can make it interesting. Plus 130 for me was just way too big. I'd have this much closer to around plus 105. And I do think that the line will shift quite considerably, especially if you think about the psyche of the Arsenal team. Like, they know that they're struggling to put the chances away. So they're going to be going a little bit more attack-minded, gung-ho, wanting to put on a bit of a show for the Arsenal fans that were very disappointed. I don't know if you saw the FA Cup game, but a lot of the fans left very, very quickly. And they were not very happy. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them go over-attacking, try and score quite a few goals, put on a bit of a show, and maybe get caught out at least once. So yeah, I'm taking a little punt on both teams to score.
Okay, you can take that punt. I'm just going to go straight up. Arsenal with on the handicap, a goal and a half, minus a goal and a half at minus 106. And you know me, I haven't been a big Arsenal backer this season, but it's all about context here. This is a picture-perfect bounce-back spot for Arsenal to come away with an emphatic performance that we've seen in recent vintage at the Emirates. They played one game in January. This game's being played on January 20th. They played one game. It was the FA Cup on January 7th. They were hanging out in Dubai, resting up, the sun. They're just living life. They're resting. Meanwhile, Crystal Palace is trying to grind it out, missing some of their best players in FA Cup ties against Everton. They play midweek, then away. Then they need to go away to Arsenal this weekend with no Elise. Good luck. Just good luck. I think this is a great spot for Arsenal for all those reasons. Minus 106. Decent enough number for me. I think Arsenal will win by at least 2. Could be 3 or 4 in this game. So a full unit play, Arsenal to cover the spread.
As long as it's 3-1, that's fine.
Then we're good. 4-1, Jake.
4-1, 5-1. Yeah,
wonderful. I mean, there's going to be a response. Arteta's side, I think the last time they lost back-to-back was a couple of years ago. It just doesn't happen. It did happen, so clearly it does. Yeah. But you get my point. This is the spot to back Arsenal on a big play. Let's move things forward. Saturday dinner time, it is Brentford and Nottingham Forest in the Ivan Toney return match. Yes, he's still a Brentford player. Yes, he's back playing this weekend. Brentford's 16th place in the table, 19 points in 19 games. They do have a couple games in hand, which could come in handy, especially with Toney returning. But really, the story of Brentford's season, injuries have simply decimated the team. They played in an FA Cup replay as well on Tuesday. Lost a heartbreaker 3-2 in extra time against Wolves. It was like 130 minutes of football. Probably didn't help for an already damaged side heading into this one. No wins in 7 in all competition for Brentford and no wins in 5 in the Premier League. No clean sheets in 11 in all competitions. They've gone over 2.5 in 6 of 8. Both teams to score in 7 of 8, and they've been the first to score in 6 of 8. Norgard didn't play, and they can ill afford to lose him long term. He might be the latest. You hope that's not the case. Back-to-back home losses against Wolves and Villa in the Premier League. By the way, over that stretch of games, they played Wolves 3 times over that span in their last 4 games. Despite the results that have gone against Brentford, the process is decent. They're still top half of the table in expected goals, courtesy of Understat, and they're top 4 in expected goals against, and their expected points on Understat as well, Jake will probably get into this a little bit more, is 30. Despite them only having 19 points in the season, that's 8 more expected goals than scored and 5 fewer expected goals against than conceded. Godos is at the Asian Cup. Onyeka and Wisa at the African Cup of Nations. Like I said, Tony's back, and Ayer returned midweek from injury. Forest are in 15th place, 20 points in 20 games. They still look to be in the danger zone, but the new manager bounce, well, it's giving them a little bit of comfort, except that off-field punishment, if it sticks, certainly doesn't help. An FA Cup replay coming up Wednesday against Blackpool after taping of this podcast. A 2-2 draw in the first leg after back-to-back impressive wins in league play against Manchester United and Newcastle for Forest. Over 2.5 in 4 of 5. Both teams to score in 5 of 6. No clean sheet ahead of Wednesday's game in their last 10 in all competitions. They are 2-2 and 6 away. 10 goals scored, 20 against. You should hear, like, they have almost a full 11 of players who are away at the AFCON. Aina, Aurier, Boli, Sangare, Kuyate, Niakate. And a partridge in a pear tree. Head-to-head, 1-1 they played too. Niakate was sent off. Norgard scored. Dominguez scored as well in quick succession. Brentford haven't lost to Forest in their last 5. Brentford no clean sheet against Forest in 11. Both teams to score has played in 5 of 5. An intriguing one. Do they get a little bit of an Ivan Toney bounce here, Brentford? They deserve some good fortune considering what they've gone through. What do you make of this game?
I do think there'll be a bounce. I would not be surprised to see Brentford snap that losing streak, but I can't bet on them at this price at -103. I've seen too much positive improvement from Nottingham Forest to get Brentford on board. I think the smartest way to go about this is back both teams to score at -127. I just think this has got all the hallmarks of being a really entertaining game. As you said, Brentford, they're missing loads of players. Forest are missing loads of players. Mainly midfield players and defence for Forest, and Brentford are just everywhere. They're just quite depleted. But yeah, this is a big game as well. You know, you just have to look at the table to know there's only a point between the sides, and there's only 4 points separating Forest to the team above Brentford from the relegation zone. So it's a real good opportunity for both to really kind of pull themselves clear. But yeah, for me, it has to be both teams to score. Like the way we all expected Nuno to go in at Forest and make things tight, cagey, play defence first, counter-attack. Well, they've done that, but they've also shown a much more willing to play on the front foot. Especially against Manchester United, they played as the aggressors. They tried to actually, advance up the pitch and get people up there. Newcastle was a little bit different, but they've created chances in all 3 matches that he's been in charge. And I expect it to continue, especially when you've got your key creators and your key players still there. Mainly Morgan Gibbs-White, who I think is probably one of the better players in the bottom half of the Premier League. And yeah, Brentford, there will be a Tony boost, no doubt. And even without him, they've scored in 4 of the last 5 that have all ended in defeat. So yeah, for me, it has to be both teams to score at -127. And as I said with the Arsenal Palace, I was expecting this to be a lot shorter than it currently is. So more than happy to make a 1.5 unit play on that one.
I agree with your play. It's just not the one I'm going to make. I'm going to make a play Brentford to score over 1.5 goals at -106 because I do think there'll be goals in this game. I think that Nottingham Forest, they're missing some really key players to AFCON and still haven't got players back from injury. Apparently he's ahead of progress. He's going to be coming back. That's going to certainly help give them a little bit more punch in their attack, which really hasn't been a problem. But I do still think they're vulnerable defensively. I have questions about the goalkeeping position, and playing Wednesday certainly won't help. I think Tony finds it back in the net this week. Chance creation hasn't been a problem for Brentford playing at home. They continue to score goals in games at home. Their last games at home, where are we here? They scored against Wolves. They scored against Wolves both times, I should say, in both competitions. They scored against Villa. They scored 3 against Luton Town. They didn't score against Arsenal, but they scored 3 against West Ham, 3 against Burnley. This is a team that creates chances. So despite missing players from their side, they can still score goals. So over 1.5 goals in this game for Brentford at -106. That's going to be my play for this game. I wouldn't discourage... I understand you'd want more juice than -103 for a Brentford win, but I wouldn't discourage that either. They're due. They're due for a performance here. And Tony coming back, if that doesn't create a response, then I'm not sure what will. So could be a big weekend for Brentford. And for both of our sake, let's hope for some goals in that game. Anything to add?
Yes, please. No, not at all. I do just the fact that Tony's back. It should be enough, really, if he stays, to keep them clear of the relegation zone. Like we said, the process has been great all season long. They've been unfortunate to be where they are, but having a player of his caliber leading the line, it's probably the envy of a couple of the teams at the top end of the table, isn't it? With the likes of Chelsea, Arsenal, Man United. So yeah, that's definitely, if he comes back and stays, then I definitely think that they'll stay comfortably clear.
We mentioned transfers. I just wonder, Brentford just are not in a position that can go on and sell a player like that right now. Perhaps this summer, but right now they just don't. They're not afforded that luxury. But I wonder if anyone is capable of testing their will, and how much that would take. Based on the way the market is going, I would say no, which means good news for Tony. And Brentford looks like they're bringing in Sergio Reguilon on loan. Look capable at times for Manchester United. So the type of move that you expect them to make to deal with some of the absences, many absences that continue to plague Brentford. Let's move ahead to Sunday. It's Sheffield United and West Ham. Sheffield United 20th place, 9 points in 20 games. Historically means relegation. There's 10 points between them and 17th place, which certainly suggests relegation. A 4-0 win over Gillingham in the FA Cup provided some respite for Sheffield United. It was their biggest away win in the FA Cup since 1983. 3 losses and a draw in their last 4 games before that. Kind of speaks to the reality that they find themselves in. 1 win in their last 9 overall, under 2.5 in 5 of 7. Now, both of their wins this season, they've only had 2 of them in the Premier League, have come at home. However, they still have the worst expected goals and the worst expected goals against at home. 10 goals scored, 24 conceded is the worst and second worst in those respective categories. Slimani and LaRouche both gone at the AFCON. West Ham United, 6th place, won 34 points. It's been a really good run of form for David Moyes' side. They did, however, lose to Bristol City in the FA Cup replay on Tuesday. It was a 1-0 final. They didn't play that well, and Benrahma was sent off for kicking out in the second half. It was perhaps one competition too many for West Ham, as they've done a decent enough job trying to balance all the games that have come their way. In the Premier League, 3 wins and a draw in their last 4 games overall. 4 consecutive Premier League clean sheets as well for the first time since 2014 for West Ham. To provide some perspective, West Ham only kept 1 clean sheet in their first 16 games of the season. Wins over Arsenal, United, and Wolves, and a draw against Brighton. Under 2.5, obviously, have played in 5 of their last 6 games. They are 5-1-4 away from home, good for 16 points, but their expected points, courtesy of Understat, tells a different story. Has them on 10 points. Agard and Kudus, they're both away at the African Cup of Nations. Bowen missed out midweek. He's going to be a real question for the weekend. And Paquetá, big loss. He is gone long-term. Head-to-head, West Ham won 2-0 previously this season. 3 West Ham United wins in a row. 3 West Ham clean sheets in a row. Under 2.5 in 5 of 6. Is this actually a good spot to make a Sheffield United play here? The fact that they didn't play midweek. West Ham's missing some really key players in this team. Considering West Ham's form, it doesn't seem to be the play, but maybe if there was a time, this is the time.
For sure, yeah. This is that Sheffield United would not get a better chance to beat a team that's currently 6th in the Premier League than this. As you mentioned, just the amount of players that are missing, key players, creative players. You know, if Bowen doesn't play, then who the hell is going to play up front and create the chances and score the goals? You know, you've got no Kudus, no Paquetá. What the hell's going to happen to West Ham's attack? And we kind of saw a bit of that in midweek, didn't we? They were very stifled, even against Bristol City. So yeah, this is a great opportunity for Sheffield United. And I think they're kind of in, I know there's still 18 games left, but 8 points from safety. They're in kitchen sink territory. Like, they've got to try everything and anything really to pull off, just pick up a couple of results. Whether that means playing a very attack-minded style in this game and really trying to take the game to West Ham at home, that could absolutely be the case. And I certainly wouldn't be putting anybody off backing them to win the game at plus 248. That West Ham price. I remember they went to Burnley. What was it? Maybe a couple of months ago, just before the last international break, I think, or just after it. And they were a similar price to win at Burnley with a full strength team. So the fact that you're still getting the same price, but minus all those key players, suggests to me that West Ham price is not value whatsoever. So I wouldn't put anybody off taking a pro Sheffield United play. For me, I initially had this down as no bet, but just thinking about it, the fact that West Ham are missing so many key attacking players, the unders is just screaming at me.
Yeah,
it really is. The line's at 2.25, but I still think taking under 2.5 at minus 125 is still a value bet. West Ham will know if they're missing all these key players, especially if Bowen's out. Their best chance of getting a result here is going to be playing defence first and really trying to stifle Sheffield United and nick a goal vintage West Ham style. So I'm going to make that play. I'm going to take under 2.5 at minus 125. Sheffield United, as you reeled off the numbers there, they struggle to create chances and score goals, whether they're at home or away. And yeah, they'll be hoping that Gillingham win gives them a bit of confidence and turns the corner a little bit. But I think West Ham have shown enough to suggest that they could deal with what is probably the worst team in the league.
1.5 unit play, the under 2.5 at minus 125. Same thing. Sheffield United gone under 2.5 in 5 of 7. West Ham 5 of 6. There's nothing to show me that this game will be free flowing and open. I do have a little bit of a concern. West Ham are very good at set pieces. That's my only concern for Sheffield United in this game. I'm also going to make a half unit play. Sheffield United to win this game outright at plus 248 for all aforementioned reasons, but just a half unit play here. So the context is never better. They have to know that this is a game that they have a real chance of going out to win it. So, yep, those are my 2 plays for that game. 2 units bet, but spread across 2 different bets. Let's keep it on Sunday. This, for me, should be the last 2 games this week. I'm not sure about the first 3, but these 2 games should be really watchable. Let's start off on Sunday. It's Bournemouth and Liverpool. Bournemouth is in 12th on 25 points. A 3-2 away win against QPR in the FA Cup after being 2 goals down at halftime in that game. Bouncing back after losing 3-1 at Spurs in the Premier League, ending a streak of 7 games undefeated. They had 24 shots against Spurs, by the way, in that game. 12 more shots than Spurs had. And the 24 shots were the most by a Bournemouth side in a Premier League game since 2019. Bournemouth have played over 2.5 in their last 5. 5 of the last 6 games in all competitions have come away from home for Bournemouth, so they're back in the vitality. 3 wins and a draw in their last 4 Premier League games at home. They're 3-3-3 at home overall, 11 scored, 12 conceded. Utara, Semenyo at AFCON. Keep an eye on Kelly and Kirkez if they can return this weekend. And Senesi suspended, so the left side of their back 4 completely unavailable for this game. Liverpool, top of the table. We continue to forget that, or maybe it's not being yelled loud enough. 54 or 45 points, I should say. 2 points clear of City and Villa with a game in hand on the ladder. They beat Arsenal away in the FA Cup 2-0, then beat Fulham 2-1 in the first leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final tie. 4 wins in a row for Liverpool in all competitions. No losses in 7 in all competitions, but undefeated in their last 13 in the Premier League. Their last loss was in September to Spurs. Their last Premier League game was a 4-2 win over Newcastle, which they produced the highest expected goals of the season. They're 5-4-1 away from home, 17-10. The 10 goals conceded is the joint best away defensive record. Salah, he's away at AFCON. Endo at the Asian Cup. Trent out long-term, and the hope is that Szoboszlai can return after missing the Cup game with a hamstring injury. Head-to-head, it was a 3-1 win for Liverpool at Anfield. Semenyo was actually scored in the 3rd minute for Bournemouth, taking the early lead, but 3 unanswered by Liverpool, and McAllister was sent off at 2-1. Liverpool won 2-1 at the Vitality in the round of 16 in the Carabao Cup as well, so there's familiarity there. These 2 sides have played to over 2.5 in 9 of their last 10 meetings. Bournemouth won 1-0, the exception to that rule in this fixture last season. So here we go. It's a good game this weekend. What do you make of this tie? What kind of result do you foresee playing out at Bournemouth on Sunday?
Yeah, this is going to be a really tasty game. We had a very pro Bournemouth stance at Spurs a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to change my view too much. As you said, the performance was good at Spurs. They created plenty of chances, and the game got away from them early doors. But they looked very, very good and very comfortable in that kind of high pressure environment. So I'm more than happy to take Bournemouth on the handicap at plus 0.75. We're getting minus 101, so pretty much even money. That for me is the only play to make here, because Liverpool, I've spoken about this a lot. Their away form or their away process anyway, over the last couple of years has been my major doubt around why I can't quite get on board with them to go and potentially get over the line and win that title. Results this season have been good away from home, but process remains poor. Like, they've created 1.73 expected goals for per game, which is okay. I mean, it's down on their home process by about 0.9. But against, they're conceding 1.5 expected goals per game when travelling. That is a serious problem for me, and that's one of the main reasons why I do think Bournemouth can cause problems and get a result, is because they'll get chances. Liverpool will present you with chances, and I think that no Salah is a huge problem for Liverpool. They looked okay against Arsenal at the Emirates. Again, Arsenal missed some good chances in that one. And then the Carabao Cup game in midweek against Fulham was, again, just an uninspiring performance, even at Anfield, from an attack that is missing its best player. So you factor all that in, and Bournemouth have performed like one of the best teams in the league for a while now, as I've touched upon a couple of pods ago. Then this is a very dangerous game for Liverpool. And yeah, you're giving me, 3/4 of a goal head start at even money for one of the more informed teams in the league. That is, for me, is an automatic play, especially at home as well. And I know that they've not played, as you said, they've played a lot of away games recently, but they're unbeaten in 4 at home. They had a good win against Newcastle, obviously beat Burnley, which is fair, but drew with Aston Villa in a game that they were the better team by a country mile. And absolutely hammered a Fulham team that went to Anfield and gave a real scare to Liverpool in that Carabao game. So yeah, I'm more than happy to keep riding with Bournemouth, whatever the price and the lines are right.
I can keep this quick, the exact same play. Last week was a week of conflict between you and I. This is a week of agreement. I'm a little bit worried about what that Bournemouth left-hand side looks like from a defensive perspective, but you not only take away Salah down the right, you take away Trent
Yeah.
down the right as well. So Gakpo, some sort of combination of Jota or Diaz, who predominantly play off the left. What's the solution there? I'm not quite sure. And I think that this is a game where they could maybe miss a player like Endo as well. A little bit more of a destroyer in the box against a team that's all out action like Bournemouth as well. So the losses for a game like this, not great. If you think that Liverpool can play it off, I keep an eye on this line to see how much Liverpool. If it gets close to even money, you're going to be tempted to play a Liverpool win. You're going to leave minus 137 right now, but there might become a point where if it gets in the minus 120 range, you're like, it might be, despite those absences, it's still Liverpool. There's still very good players in this team. So keep an eye on that.
I think, you touched upon the Bournemouth absentees, and, Liverpool, obviously, they're missing their entire right side, which is one of the probably the most creative and dangerous right sides, or devastating right sides in the entire league. And, they're still missing Robertson and Tsimikas. They're both still expected to be out, which means Joe Gomez is having to play at left back, and youngster Bradley is going to have to cover again at right back. So that's another, not only are you making Liverpool's right side weaker, but it's probably even weaker than what we'd expect, and a potential avenue for success for Bournemouth down that left side. So, yeah, it definitely is. It seems like a good opportunity for Bournemouth, a good time to play Liverpool.
Also, I'm not going to make the play, but the under is intriguing. The line's at 3.25 at minus 106. Seems to be a number that is in the playable range for me. No bet for this podcast, but it's something I might look into as we approach kickoff. Any thoughts on that, or shall we move forward to Monday Night Football?
I can see why you're leaning towards the under because it's a high line, right? But I definitely would be staying away from that, given the defensive absentees of both and just the way in which both play. Both like Bournemouth, we've seen them play that high press, and they could get some joy from it. They could also get torn apart with some very precise passing from Van Dijk and McAllister, and before you know it, the ball's right at the other end of the pitch. So, yeah, from a goal line perspective, that would scare me.
Final match of the weekend. It is Monday Night Football. Brighton hosts Wolves in a game where, at least to me, it screams goals. Brighton's 8th in the table, 31 points, just a point behind Manchester United. A 4-2 away win at Stoke in the FA Cup. Estupiñán has come back. He's been absolutely on fire. He scored in that game. They played a goalless draw against West Ham before that. Brightons have been held without a goal twice in the last 4 games, and it only happened once in their 44 games before that. Brighton haven't lost in their last 4 overall. They've actually played to the under 2.5 in 5 of 7. Brighton are undefeated in their last 9 at home in all competitions. Just 1 loss at home in the Premier League. 5-4-1 overall, with 22 goals scored, 14 conceded. They've scored in every home match this season. Adringa's at the African Cup of Nations. Mitoma is at the Asian Cup. Still not playing, but he's away from the Brighton side. Wolves, 11th in the Premier League table, 28 points, and just a point back of Newcastle to break into the top half. They're the team that my read on them entering the season was the most wrong. Gary O'Neill and company have played phenomenally well in the advance in the FA Cup as well. A marathon replay, 3-2 extra time win over Brentford on Tuesday. Cunha with the winner in the 105th minute. Cunha, by the way, 10 goal involvements in his last 11 games. Wolves now undefeated in 5 in all competitions. 3 of them did come against Brentford, but 3 straight Premier League wins and just 1 loss in their last 8 in all competitions. They played to the over 2.5 in 5 of 6. They're coming off a Premier League 3-0 win over Everton. They won back-to-back games, scoring 3+ in the Premier League for the first time since 1964. Incredible. They beat Brentford 4-1 away in their last time that they traveled in the Premier League, snapping a stretch of 4 straight away defeats. 3-1-6 away with 14 goals scored, 17 conceded. Aït-Nouri Traoré off at the African Cup of Nations. Hwang Hee-chan, their leading goal scorer, he's off at the Asian Cup. Gonge suspended. Bueno and Dawson both started from the bench after missing the first leg of the FA Cup tie. Both came on and played midweek against Brentford. Neto, good news, firmly back. And he played off the bench midweek as well. Head-to-head, Brighton won 4-1 at the Molineux, with Brighton going up 4-0 in that game. Brighton won 6-0 at home against Wolves before that, and put 3 goals past Wolves in the 2 games before that as well. All Brighton victories against Wolves, so make it 4 wins in a row in the head-to-head. And this fixture has provided goals, the over 2.5 in 6 of 7. Goals is the direction I'm going. What say you, Jake Osgathorpe?
Yeah, it's hard to see this being a low-scoring game, isn't it? Especially with, well, I was going to say the absentees at both sides probably makes them a little bit weaker defensively. And yeah, Brighton, they have generally been very good for the overs. They've had a little bit of a slow patch, haven't they? With 1-1, 2-0, 1-1, and 0-0. Then obviously that crazy 4-2 against Spurs. But just the way in which Wolves play, very open, very attack-minded, aren't concerned too much about defending. And they obviously pack a punch themselves going forward. And like you said, yeah, Hwang's out. He's at the Asian Cup. But Pedro Neto is probably arguably their best player, the best creator, that is for sure. So yeah, I'm definitely going with goal as well. Has to be. The line's at 2 3/4. I mean, early on in the season, we were getting 3.5.
Why is it just there? I can't believe it's so low. I'm actually shocked. It's at minus 115, mind you, but still, 2 3/4.
We need to lock it in now.
Yeah,
lock it in now because the price is not going to stay for sure. It's going to be. The line's going to move. That is for certain. It's going to probably go off at over 3 at the very least. It might even push to 3.25 once the team uses out. Because if I think I was chatting to some guys in the office about this before the Stoke game, and everyone was saying, "Oh, Brighton going to Stoke's a tough game. It's a vintage FA Cup upset." I was like, "Yeah, but De Zerbi's literally got no players fit. So he's got to play his first team, and his first team literally on that day was just all attackers. He don't have anybody else." So I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him take a similar approach, and João Pedro and Ferguson and everybody that he's got available from an attacking perspective starts, and that could be just pure carnage on Monday night, and definitely make it just enjoyable for the neutral. So yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. It's going to be 1.5 units for me on the over 2.75.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest bet of the year. Let's go 2 units on over 2.75. I'm that confident on this because Wolves score goals. They do. The way that they play, it sets up for a really watchable fixture here. The history in this fixture tells you as much, as well as recent form. Still coming off the Brighton bench in that game against Stoke, Lallana, Motor, Ferguson, Estupinian, Dahoud didn't play. Like, as much as injuries have affected them, they still have a very deep team in terms of players that can go out there and attack. I think that this team has some real depth, and it's been proven to be the case over the course of the season. When they get back in CISO and some of these players who are on the verge of coming back in short order, there's going to be even more options for De Zerbi to play in multiple competitions here. So I think they've done a nice job. Like I said, I love the way that Wolves have played. The fact that Neto's back in the team, the players that are missing, I think are replaceable. I know that Chan's done exceptionally well, but I think that he's the beneficiary of a lot of the work that goes on around him, rather than him being this prolific striker. So let's go over the total in this game. It could be high. I was even thinking about pushing it to 3 at plus 113. Not quite enough juice for me to do that, so let's stay at 2.75. 2 units, Jake. 1-2. 2 units. Let's go big.
Yep. This is either going to be a good weekend or a bad weekend for us, because I think we've got 1.5 units on a couple. And well, yeah. But this week's more than most, in the sense that I think there's 5 games. We've each got at least one bet in all of them, and we've got a couple of 1.5 units each. And you've got a little 2 unit play as well, which...
And I have a 1.5 unit play. Very rare for me. So 5 games, not the sexiest fixtures that we'll see over the course of the season, but some real value there this weekend, at least from where we stand. And as much as I like a good Gareth versus Jake head-to-head, alignment provides me a little bit more of a pep in my step heading into the weekend fixtures. Good luck. Follow along at Jake Oz on X, myself at Gareth Wheeler, Gareth.Wheeler on Instagram. 25 years of Pinnacle, the best odds on market. Best of luck this weekend, Jake, and we'll get out of the broken up game weeks and back to normal service come the end of the month. We're looking forward to it.
Big time, yeah. Best of luck. We've got a lot of points riding on this weekend, so fingers crossed it's a successful one.
Enjoy it to all of you out there. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends about this podcast. We enjoy doing this on a weekly basis. This has been EPL Insights for Game Week 21 in the Premier League.